Welcome to the Echoes of Ihsan podcast, and welcome to a deep dive into a truly fascinating area of Islamic law.
Oh, this is going to be good.
Yeah, we're cracking open the Muwatta Imam Malik,
Classic.
specifically Book 40 Hudud, which deals with fixed punishments for specific crimes in early Islamic society.
Right.
But don't worry, we're not going to get bogged down in the nitty-gritty of crime and punishment today.
Okay.
Instead, we're going to explore a concept that might surprise you.
Okay.
The idea of mudabar.
Interesting.
Imagine a system where slavery exists,
Right.
but within that system, there's a pathway to freedom,
Okay.
a glimmer of hope for those bound by its constraints.
I like it.
That's what we're going to unpack today.
Okay.
The intricate legal framework surrounding the mudabar, a slave who's been promised eventual freedom.
It's like stepping into a time machine where societal structures and legal systems are vastly different from what we're used to today.
Right.
The Muwatta Imam Malik offers us this incredible window into that world, a world grappling with complex questions of justice, freedom, and the rights of individuals, even within a system that, to our modern sensibilities, seems inherently unjust.
It's a real head-scratcher, isn't it?
It is.
To think about concepts like freedom and justice within a context where slavery was an accepted norm.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in.
Okay.
What exactly does it mean to be a mudabar? Is it like a get-out-of-jail-free card, or is there more to it?
It's definitely not a simple get-out-of-jail-free card.
Okay.
Think of it more as a conditional delayed form of freedom. It's a promise, a legally binding promise, that the slave will be granted freedom upon the death of their master.
Okay.
But, as you can imagine, things are rarely that straightforward.
Right.
Especially when you factor in issues like inheritance, debt, and the complexities of human relationships.
So it's not immediate emancipation, but a promise for the future.
Right.
Kind of freedom in waiting.
Yeah.
I can already see how this sets the stage for some interesting legal scenarios.
Absolutely. And the Muwatta doesn't shy away from exploring those scenarios in detail. It lays out a framework for navigating the intricate web of rights and obligations that arise when a slave is designated as mudabar. For instance, let's consider the children of a mudabra, a slave woman promised freedom.
Okay.
Do those children also inherit their mother's promise of freedom?
Okay, now we're getting to the heart of it.
Yeah.
It seems only natural that children would share their mother's fate.
Right.
But I imagine the legal system might have something to say about that.
You're right to be cautious.
Okay.
Because this is where the legal intricacies come into play.
Yeah.
According to Imam Malik, the answer is a resounding yes.
Wow.
The children of a mudabra inherit their mother's status.
Okay.
They too are promised freedom upon the death of the master.
Okay.
It's not just a matter of sentiment.
Right.
It's a legally binding principle.
That makes sense from a humanitarian perspective. It would be cruel to separate families and keep children enslaved while their mother is on the path to freedom.
Yeah.
But I have to wonder about the practical implications.
Sure.
What happens, for instance, if the master dies and his estate isn't sufficient to cover the value of all the mudabar slaves he's promised to free?
That's where things get really fascinating.
Okay.
This is where the Muwatta reveals its depth and complexity. You see, in Islamic law, there's a concept of limiting bequests to a third of the estate.
Okay.
So even if a master promises to free all his slaves, only a third of his assets can be used to fulfill that promise after his debts and other obligations are settled.
So there's this inherent tension between the master's promise of freedom and the financial realities of the estate.
Yeah.
How does Islamic jurisprudence reconcile those competing claims?
It aims for a balance, a delicate balancing act between upholding the master's promise and ensuring fairness in the distribution of assets.
Okay.
The Muwatta outlines specific guidelines for such cases, prioritizing the fulfillment of the mudabar status to the extent possible within the limitations of the estate.
I'm already starting to see how intricate this system is.
Yeah.
It's not just about rigid rules, but about navigating complex scenarios with careful consideration for all parties involved.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the sophistication of early Islamic jurisprudence. They were grappling with real-world scenarios, seeking solutions that were both just and practical.
Right.
And believe me, it gets even more intriguing when we factor in the master's potential change of heart or unforeseen circumstances like debt and crime.
Hold on. Can a master just go back on their word? After promising a slave's eventual freedom?
Yeah.
it seems like that would undermine the whole concept of mutabar.
You raise a valid point,
Yeah.
and the Muwatta addresses this directly.
Okay.
Selling a mutabar outright is strictly prohibited. It's a legally binding promise that can't be easily revoked. But the Muwatta acknowledges that life is full of complexities.
Right.
What happens if the master finds himself in deep debt?
Okay.
Can creditors seize the mutabar as an asset to recover their dues?
Right.
Or imagine a scenario where the master offers the mutabar immediate freedom in exchange for a payment plan. Does that alter the legal equation?
Okay, now we're getting into some serious legal maneuvering.
Yeah.
It sounds like every action, every decision has a ripple effect in this system with potential consequences for everyone involved.
You're absolutely right.
Okay.
Each scenario raises new legal questions about the rights and obligations of all parties involved. The master, the mutabar, and any third parties like creditors or heirs.
Yeah.
And the Muwatta meticulously dissects these questions, providing guidance for navigating this intricate legal landscape. It's like a legal chess game where every move has to be carefully calculated.
It's incredible how the Muwatta serves as this comprehensive guide. Not just a collection of laws, but a roadmap for navigating the complexities of human interactions and agreements.
Yeah.
Within a system that, from our modern perspective, might seem inherently flawed.
It's a testament to the legal minds of the time, their ability to create a framework for justice and fairness, even within a system that we today would consider morally problematic.
Right.
And believe me, we're just scratching the surface.
Okay.
Wait till we delve into what happens when a mutabar commits a crime, especially a crime that requires paying blood money or daya.
Okay, now you've piqued my curiosity.
Good.
What happens when a mutabar commits a crime? Does their status as someone promised freedom affect their legal accountability?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
Fasten your seatbelt because we're about to delve into the intricate world of crime, punishment, and the delicate balance between the rights of the mutabar and the demands of justice.
Hit me with it.
Oh,
I'm ready for the deep dive.
Let's imagine a scenario where a mutabar commits a crime.
That requires the payment of blood money, known as daya in Islamic law.
Right.
Now, daya is a complex concept in itself, involving financial compensation paid to the victim's family as a form of retribution.
Right.
It's designed to deter violence and ensure a degree of justice for the aggrieved party. But when a mutabar is involved, it raises a whole new set of questions.
Right.
Does the master bear the responsibility of paying the daya? After all, the mutabar is still technically his property.
That's a tough one.
It is.
On one hand, the master still holds legal ownership of the mutabar.
Right.
But on the other hand, the mutabar is on a trajectory towards freedom.
Right.
With a promise hanging over their head.
Yeah.
It seems unfair to burden the master with the consequences of the mutabar's actions.
Yeah.
Especially when the mutabar is on a path to becoming a fully independent individual.
You've hit upon the very crux of the matter.
Okay.
It's this clash between legal ownership and the evolving status of the mutabar.
Right. That creates this fascinating legal puzzle.
Yeah.
And the Muwatta explores these nuances in detail, offering guidance on how to navigate this complex terrain.
Okay.
Let's add another layer of complexity.
Okay.
What if the master dies, leaving behind debts?
Okay.
And the mutabar is his only remaining asset?
Right.
How is the blood money calculated against the mutabar's own possessions, the master's estate, and the potential inheritance of the mutabar's freedom?
It's like a legal Rubik's Cube.
It is.
Twisting and turning with each new variable introduced.
Yeah.
How did they even begin to unravel these complexities back then?
It speaks to the sophistication and depth of early Islamic jurisprudence. They weren't simply applying rigid rules.
Right.
They were grappling with real-world scenarios, striving for a system that was both just and practical, even within the constraints of a society where slavery was an accepted norm.
And just when I thought we had reached peak complexity, there's another layer to unravel. The Muwatta also discusses the status of Walid, a slave woman who has borne a child for her master.
Yes, the Walid.
Yeah.
She holds a unique position within the system.
Right.
Afforded certain protections, including the right not to be sold. Right. It's a recognition of the special bond created through motherhood.
Yeah.
But what if she commits a crime requiring blood money? Does her special status shield her from the consequences?
Wait, so even with her unique position and the inherent value placed on motherhood, she's still subject to the same legal consequences as anyone else.
That's right.
Wow.
The Muwatta makes it clear that nobody is above the law, not even in a wallet.
Right.
It addresses this specific scenario,
Okay.
exploring whether the master is obligated to pay the blood money in such a case, and how her unique status might affect the legal outcome.
Okay.
It's a testament to the comprehensiveness and nuanced nature of this legal framework.
This whole discussion has been a real eye-opener.
Good.
It's making me rethink my understanding of Islamic law. It's far more intricate and thought-provoking than I ever imagined.
It's a system that often gets reduced to simple stereotypes.
Right.
But when you delve into its nuances,
Yeah.
you discover a rich tapestry of legal thought, grappling with complex human scenarios.
Yeah.
And believe me, we've only just begun to explore the intricacies of the Mudabar's journey toward freedom.
Okay.
It's going to be quite a ride.
I'm looking forward to it.
It's like peeling back the layers of an onion, isn't it?
It is.
Each scenario reveals new intricacies.
Uh-huh.
And the Muwatta Imam Malik doesn't shy away from dissecting those intricacies with remarkable precision.
Right.
It's a testament to the depth of thought and consideration that went into developing this legal framework.
It's definitely making my head spin, but in a good way.
Good.
It's like a legal thriller where the stakes are incredibly high.
Yeah.
Freedom, justice,
Right.
and the very fabric of society are all woven into these rulings.
Absolutely.
So we've talked about the general concept of Mudabar, the implications for their children,
Yeah.
the sticky situations involving debts and changes of heart,
Right.
and even the complexities of crimes and blood money. It's a lot to process.
It is indeed.
Yeah.
But the beauty of the Muwatta is that it guides us through it all.
Okay.
Step by meticulous step.
Right.
It's like a legal GPS navigating the complex terrain of early Islamic society.
I like that.
So,
Yeah.
shall we dive a bit deeper into some of the specific rulings and situations that Imam Malik highlights?
Absolutely. I'm ready for more.
Okay.
What other real-world scenarios can you share that illustrate how the status of Mudabar plays out in practice?
Well, Imam Malik provides this fascinating example in the Muwatta that really brings the concept of Mudabar to life. He describes a situation where a Mudabar approaches his master with a proposition.
Okay.
The Mudabar says, "Free me immediately and I will pay you 50 dinars in installments." The master, perhaps seeing the value in a motivated and potentially profitable freedman, agrees and sets up a payment plan of 10 dinars per year.
Okay.
But then just a few days later, the master dies.
Oh, wow. Talk about a curveball.
Right.
That throws a wrench into things, doesn't it?
It does.
So what happens to the agreement?
Yeah.
Does the Mudabar still have to pay even though the master has passed away? Is the promise of freedom voided?
This is where the legal framework really demonstrates its sophistication.
Okay.
According to Imam Malik, the freeing of the Mudabar is considered confirmed and binding.
Oh, wow.
The 50 dinars become a debt owed by the Mudabar. Not to the master personally, but to the master's estate.
Okay.
It's a fascinating insight into how Islamic law recognized and upheld agreements, even in the face of unforeseen circumstances.
So even though the master is gone, the agreement still holds. It speaks to the importance of honoring commitments and upholding contracts, even when death disrupts the original terms.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this specific ruling sheds light on how Islamic law approached the concept of freedom itself.
Okay.
It wasn't a black and white all or nothing situation. There were gradations, conditions, and legal frameworks that allowed for a more nuanced transition from slavery to freedom.
So it's not just like, boom, you're free.
Right.
It's more of a process.
Exactly.
Right.
Imam Malik goes on to clarify that the Mudabar, in this scenario, is granted full legal status as a free person.
Okay.
Their testimony is admissible in court. Their personal safety is protected. They can inherit property.
Right.
And they are subject to the full range of legal punishments for any crimes they may commit.
Wow, that's a significant shift.
It is.
It's like stepping through a doorway into a new life with all the rights and responsibilities that come with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this transition from a state of conditional freedom
to full legal recognition as a free individual underscores the progressive nature of Islamic jurisprudence. It wasn't just about maintaining the status quo.
Right.
It was about creating pathways for social mobility and individual empowerment, even within the context of a system like slavery.
It's making me realize that the concept of freedom as we understand it today, is a relatively recent development.
It is.
Back then, freedom was often a process, a transition with legal and social implications that rippled through the fabric of society.
You're right to point that out.
Yeah.
The Muwatta offers us this glimpse into a time when freedom wasn't simply granted or denied, but was often negotiated, earned, and even inherited.
Wow.
It's a concept that challenges our modern assumptions about individual rights and reminds us that the journey towards freedom has taken many forms throughout history.
Okay, let's dive back into some of the legal intricacies we touched on earlier.
Sure. What about the situation where a master dies, leaving behind a mudabar, but his estate isn't enough to cover the slave's value?
Okay.
We talked about this briefly, but I'd love to hear more details about how that scenario plays out in practice.
Of course.
Yeah.
Imam Malik outlines a very specific,
Okay.
and I might add, quite considerate process for such situations. Imagine a master dies, leaving some property that's readily available, cash or livestock, and some assets that are yet to be collected or accounted for.
Okay.
Perhaps debts owed to him or the proceeds from a future harvest.
Right.
If the readily available property isn't sufficient to cover the mudabar's value, within that third of the estate that can be used for bequests, then the mudabar isn't immediately freed.
So they're stuck in limbo.
Kind of.
What happens to them in the meantime?
They are placed in a kind of holding pattern.
Okay.
It's not ideal, but it's a practical solution designed to balance competing interests. They are not treated as a regular slave, but they aren't fully free either.
Right.
They are cared for. Their basic needs are met.
Okay.
But any income they generate through their labor is set aside, accumulating like a savings account.
Okay.
Until the master's remaining assets are fully accounted for.
So they're in this in-between space, this liminal state, waiting for their fate to be determined.
Precisely.
It's a poignant image.
It is.
This idea of someone on the cusp of freedom, but still tethered to the system they're hoping to escape.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that the path to freedom is not always a straight line. There can be twists and turns, delays, and setbacks. But Islamic law, as illustrated in the Muwatta, aims to ensure that the promise of freedom, once made, is ultimately honored, if at all possible.
So what happens once all the master's assets are collected?
Okay.
Is there a moment of truth where the mudabar's fate is finally decided?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Once the master's financial affairs are settled. Yeah.
The total value of the estate is carefully calculated. If a third of that total is enough to cover the mudabar's value, then they are finally and fully freed.
Okay.
And here's the interesting part.
Yeah.
They get to keep any income they've earned during that waiting period.
That's a nice touch, isn't it?
It is.
It's like a reward for their patience and continued labor during a time of uncertainty.
Yeah.
But what if the estate still isn't enough to cover the full value of the mudabar, even after all the assets are accounted for?
Yeah.
What happens then?
That's where things get a bit more complicated.
Okay.
But the Muwatta offers a solution that aims to be as fair as possible given the circumstances.
Oh, okay.
Imam Malik says that in such cases, only a portion of the mudabar is freed.
Okay.
Proportionate to what the estate can cover within that third allowed for bequests.
Okay, so let's say, for example, that the mudabar is valued at 100 dinars.
Okay.
But the estate only has 50 dinars available after debts and other obligations are settled.
Right. Does that mean half of the mudabar is freed? I mean, how do you practically implement that?
It's a fascinating concept, isn't it?
It is.
It's not about literally splitting a person in half.
Right.
But rather about recognizing that their freedom can be acquired in increments.
Okay.
Reflecting the financial realities of the estate. In this scenario, the mudabar would essentially gain a proportional amount of freedom.
Right.
They might still be obligated to work for the heirs to a certain degree.
Okay.
But they would also have certain rights and freedoms commensurate with the portion of their value that has been covered by the estate.
So it's like a sliding scale of freedom.
Yeah.
Moving towards full emancipation as their value is gradually covered.
Right.
It's a remarkably nuanced approach.
It is.
Trying to strike a balance between the deceased master's wishes, the financial realities of the estate, and the mudabar's right to eventual freedom.
Exactly.
It highlights the ingenuity and flexibility of early Islamic jurists.
They weren't simply applying rigid rules.
Right.
They were grappling with real-world scenarios, often involving competing interests, and striving to find solutions that were both just and practical.
Right.
And remember, we're exploring these concepts within a historical context where slavery was an accepted norm.
It's definitely a different world from our own.
It is.
But the principles at play,
Yeah.
the quest for fairness and the recognition of individual rights,
Right.
those are concepts that resonate across time and cultures.
They do.
It makes you wonder if there are any parallels or lessons to be drawn from these historical precedents that might inform our understanding of similar issues in the modern world.
That's a very insightful observation.
Yeah.
While the context is vastly different.
Right.
The underlying principles at work here, upholding agreements, balancing competing claims,
Right.
and ensuring a degree of fairness, these are ideas that continue to inform legal and ethical frameworks today.
Yeah.
Perhaps by studying these historical examples, we can gain a deeper appreciation for the complexities of justice
Right.
and the ongoing evolution of human rights.
It's definitely giving me a lot to ponder.
Good.
Okay, so we've explored scenarios involving debts and insufficient estates. But what about the flip side?
Okay.
What happens if the Mudabar themselves has property?
Yeah.
What if they die before their master, leaving behind assets?
Right.
How does Islamic law address those situations?
That's another fascinating aspect of the Mudabar system, and one that really underscores the legal recognition of their evolving status. Imam Malik addresses this directly in the Muwatta, offering insights into how the inheritance laws intersect with the concept of Mudabar.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Good.
Let's hear what Imam Malik has to say about the inheritance rights of a Mudabar.
When it comes to bequests and inheritance, Islamic law draws a clear distinction between a general promise to free a slave and the specific legally binding status of a mudabar. It's like the difference between saying, I might give you this gift someday, and actually signing a contract that guarantees the transfer of ownership.
So even if a master includes a provision in his will expressing the intention to free a slave, it doesn't carry the same legal weight as declaring them a mudabar during his lifetime.
Exactly.
Okay.
A will can be changed, intentions can shift, especially as death approaches and priorities are reassessed.
Right.
Imam Malik emphasizes that a master can alter his will, revoke the promise of freedom, or even sell the slave outright, right up until his last breath, as long as it's a general bequest and not the specific declaration of mudabar.
Right.
But with a mudabar, the promise of eventual freedom is locked in. It's a legally binding contract that creates a set of rights and obligations that cannot be easily undone.
It's like the difference between a verbal agreement and a legally binding contract.
Precisely.
That mudabar declaration is a game changer, establishing a legal framework that protects the slave's right to eventual freedom.
And Imam Malik provides some fascinating examples to illustrate this distinction.
Okay.
Imagine a scenario where a master, while in good health, declares all of his slaves to be mudabar. Now imagine that these slaves represent his entire estate.
Okay, so all his property is tied up.
Right.
In slaves who are promised freedom upon his death.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that leave nothing for his heirs?
It seems like a legal and logistical conundrum.
Yeah.
It certainly does. But Islamic law, as you've seen throughout our discussion, is remarkably adaptable and resourceful.
Right.
It has mechanisms for addressing even the most perplexing situations.
Okay.
In this case, the order in which the slaves were declared mudabar becomes crucial.
Oh, so the first in line have priority when it comes to claiming their freedom.
Exactly.
It's like a first-come, first-served system within the framework of the Mudabar Declaration.
Right. You've got it. The slaves who were declared mudabar first have a stronger claim to freedom.
Okay.
Their value is assessed against that third of the estate that the master is allowed to bequeath. If their value falls within that third, they are freed outright.
Okay.
The remaining portion of that third is then applied to the next mudabar slave in line, and so on, until that portion of the estate is exhausted.
Okay.
It's a system designed to fulfill the master's promise to the greatest extent possible within the limitations of the estate.
It's like a queue forming with each mutabar, hoping to reach the front before the funds run out.
Right.
What if he declares them all mutabar at the same time?
Okay.
Or if he makes this grand declaration while he's already on his deathbed?
Yeah.
Does that change things?
You're asking all the right questions.
Yeah.
Yes, that scenario alters the legal dynamics.
Okay.
If the master declares all his slaves as mutabar simultaneously,
Right.
or does so when he's already ill,
Yeah.
it's treated differently,
Okay.
more like a general bequest.
In such cases, Imam Malik says that all the mutabar slaves are assessed as a group,
Okay.
and their combined value is weighed against that third of the estate.
Right.
Then that third is divided among them proportionately.
So instead of some gaining full freedom and others receiving nothing,
Yeah.
they all receive a portion of freedom,
Right.
reflecting their individual value in relation to that third of the estate.
Exactly.
It's a way of ensuring that the master's intention is honored, even if it can't be fulfilled completely.
Precisely. It's about finding a balance,
Yeah.
ensuring that the spirit of the Mutabar Declaration is upheld.
Right.
Even when the letter of the law can't be followed to the absolute T.
Right.
It's this kind of flexibility and nuanced decision-making that makes Islamic jurisprudence so fascinating. It's a system that recognizes the complexities of human life.
Right.
And strives to find solutions that are both just and compassionate.
We've talked a lot about the master dying with debts. But what about the other side of the equation?
What if the Mutabar themselves have property?
Yeah.
What happens if they die before their master,
Yeah, right.
leaving behind assets of their own?
That's another fascinating area where the Mutabar's evolving legal status comes into play.
Okay.
Imam Malik addresses this scenario in detail, highlighting the intersection between inheritance laws and the promise of eventual freedom.
Okay.
He states that if a mutabar dies before their master and leaves behind property, a third of that mutabar is considered freed.
Wait a minute. A third of the Mutabar?
Yeah.
I thought we were talking about inheritance, not splitting people into fractions.
Right.
How does that work?
It's not about literally dividing a person, of course,
Okay.
but about recognizing that the promise of freedom has tangible legal consequences, even in death.
Okay.
In this case, the third of the mutabar that's considered freed is symbolic
Okay.
of the portion of their life they would have lived in freedom
Right.
had they outlived their master.
Okay.
And because that portion is considered freed,
Yeah. The property associated with that freed portion is then passed on to their heirs.
it's as if the promise of freedom casts a shadow, even beyond the grave.
It does.
A portion of them is liberated, so to speak, even if they didn't live to experience it fully.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it?
It is.
It speaks to the enduring nature of this promise, its ability to transcend even the boundaries of life and death.
This whole discussion has been a real eye-opener.
Good.
I came into this deep dive thinking I knew something about Islamic law,
But
it turns out I was just skimming the surface.
Right.
The Muwatta Imam Malik has revealed a depth and complexity that I never imagined.
It is a remarkable work.
It's a testament to the intellectual rigor and the profound moral considerations that shaped this legal system.
It's been a pleasure to guide you through this journey of discovery.
Well, thank you for joining me on this journey.
Of course.
The Muwatta is a treasure trove of legal wisdom,
It is.
and I encourage you to continue exploring its depths.
I second that. There are many more fascinating rulings and scenarios to uncover,
Absolutely.
each offering insights into the challenges and triumphs of seeking justice and fairness within a historical context that might seem alien to us today.
It's a journey worth taking.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the heart of Islamic jurisprudence.
Yes.
We hope you found it as enlightening as we did.
I hope so.
May this exploration inspire you to delve deeper into the rich tapestry of Islamic legal thought.
Yeah.
Until next time, may your pursuit of knowledge be blessed with understanding and insight.